Welcome, everyone, to episode number 98 of Underserved. Joining me today is Gu Xie, Head of Data Engineering at Group 1001. Let's get started.
Welcome to this week's edition of Underserved, the podcast for the rest of the tech industry, where we focus on stories of tech industry leaders, their insights, and their lessons learned. And now, your host, Andrew Jelina.
Gu, thank you so much for joining me today on Underserved.
Thank you, Andrew. Really excited to be here.
So I believe you are our first guest ever that grew up in Belize. What was that like?
It was interesting. Very interesting to grow up in a smaller country. I would say that it was very peaceful for the most part when I was growing up. I think what was interesting is the fact that I was like one of the very few Chinese people there. So it was kind of interesting. If you ever watched that show, Fresh Off the Boat, and how there's like the kid that opened up his lunchbox and everyone is like going around saying, "Ew, what's that?" That's exactly my story growing up in Belize.
This is the food of my people.
This is the food of my people. It's not weird.
What was your family doing there?
We had a modest little grocery store. My dad is a wild one. Like when my mom was like 6 months pregnant, he decided, I don't want to be in China anymore. I don't want a kid to grow up in this like communist environment. So next thing you know, they hopped on a plane, they've traveled around and they landed in Belize. And he realized that, oh, wow, it's 2 hours away from the US. That's his ultimate goal. It's an English-speaking country, so his kids, that is me, can grow up learning English, so it'd be easier transition than, say, if I was in like Mexico or whatever. And so we had a small, modest grocery store. So I remember working in the grocery store, like all family-owned businesses in Belize. The kid always worked there, so I've been working pretty much since I was like 8 years old, running the shop, collecting payments, helping customers, buying their products, weighing out the little bags of like rice down to like the exact gram they were selling to. That's what we had.
Wow. In school, are you getting exposed to technology at all? Any computer science?
Yeah, actually, I remember in primary school, we went to a lab that was outside to actually learn computers. So I remember sitting down in this little like air conditioned room, because apparently you can't have computers in this normal hot Caribbean environment. You have to have AC on. And I remember just like looking at that little cathode ray tube screen back then, and it was Windows 95. I was the first one. I remember like looking at the GUI and navigating to that start menu. And then first thing I did, I like navigate to the game section, open up Minecraft. I'm like, wow, that was awesome.
And you were hooked.
Exactly.
What was your first CS class like in high school?
I actually failed it. It was like midway through the semester. So that, you're giving the report cards, and somehow all my other grades were fine. I mean, I've never been like an A student, but it was good enough. And on there, it says computer science F. And I was thinking, oh my God, I have to take this back and show this to my mom and dad. So I contemplated, can I just like forge it? And like, nah, I'll just bite the bullet. It is what it is. I still have no idea how it happened during that time. So I just like, okay, here's that. And he was livid. He was so angry at me. He was like, how can you fail computer science? We literally went to like US and Houston and bought you a computer, spent $1,000 for it, imported back here, it was broken. We had to fix it. And here we are on the internet every single day. Like we can't even get phone calls in because we had like dial-up modem. And somehow you got an F? It was like the Easter holidays. And basically, my dad had me go through the whole computer science textbook from the first page to the end and did every single exercise, went through every little page, every little thing. Funny enough, when we went back to class and I, talked to the teacher and I was like, Mr. Austin, like, what happened here? He looked at the grade and was like, you shouldn't have an F. He checked. It looks like he typed it wrong. It was supposed to be an A. It's supposed to be an A. Because of that one moment, because I went through every single exercise and I kind of knew like I was hooked. Like I was really, really hooked. Like I just wanted to learn everything I could about computers. That's pretty much like driven my whole career, actually.
It's one of those moments where an accidental F ends up giving you a ton of motivation.
An accidental F in Belize with a very furious Chinese father figure. Yeah.
Oh, that's a lot of Fs. So what makes you folks move from Belize to the U.S.?
The story really is that my grandmother was ready in the States. She was brought in by her mother, my great-grandmother, and she applied for immigration for us. There's a whole like queue for it to wait. And considering we're in Belize and we're from China, the queue is much shorter. So in theory, we should have came to the States back in 2001. But of course, 9/11 happened and that set everything back. So ultimately what happened was I remember I was like turning into 18, and I was like in my second year of college. And then next thing you know, immigration came in 2008. And then we had to sell the whole house in like less than a month, pack whatever we could keep, the little bit of clothes that we had in suitcases. And next thing you know, like we came to the States and I had to start everything over again. We had to start everything over. And that was a huge transition. I was, to be honest, not prepared for it. Coming from Belize and Caribbean, like everything is a lot more slower pace. And then coming to like Houston of all places, like, oh my God, it's just everything everywhere all at once.
Ooh, good reference. Good movie. So what was it like being there? Were you going to school in Houston at the time?
Yeah, initially started going to University of Houston. And I think a few things that stood out to me. I spent a lot of time getting rid of my accent because I wanted to make sure. If there's one thing I learned while I was like in college in Belize was there was a linguistics class. And I remember there was a portion where it talked about the fact that your accent, your the way you speak, people treat you differently. And I was very keen, like, especially from the Caribbean. There's like different levels of Creole. There's like a more sophisticated version, and then there's like a lesser sophisticated version. That always stood out to me. So when I came to the States, the first thing I did is I worked on getting rid of my accent. Hence, hopefully you can't detect any of the Caribbean piece.
No, I wouldn't think you were from Houston either. I think you were from, somewhere on the Eastern Seaboard.
Yeah, you never know. But yeah, when we went to go to Houston, it was a confusing bit of time because like it was around 2008. During that time, you had like the whole financial crisis and everything was just on a downward trend. Everything was just all doom and gloom. But I remember going to college and I was trying to decide, what do I want to be? I know I like computers, but everyone I spoke to at the time was telling me that don't go into computer science, don't be a programmer. Like that job's not going to exist anymore. Everyone I spoke to, like we traveled in New York to meet a family friend and he was like, don't go into computers. Like all the jobs are being outsourced. Don't do that. So I thought, okay, fine. I'll try something else. So I started doing accounting.
Okay. And did that stick?
Nope. It turns out I really dislike staring at
debits and credits.
It just didn't stick. So then I thought, okay, maybe something else in business. Tried finance. Thought, okay, I like money. That resonates with me, but still didn't really stick. Eventually, I did find out what I wanted it to be. And it turned out that I had to like go to Georgia to make that happen.
Not for golf, but your parents moved to Augusta, Georgia, right?
Yeah, Augusta, Georgia. So when my parents first came to the States, they had a tough time adjusting, much harder than I did. They didn't know what to do. They knew how to run a grocery store. So they thought, Augusta, Georgia. There's no grocery store that's, run by Chinese folks. Not that many of them. So my dad thought that would be a good idea to open up a Chinese grocery store in Augusta, Georgia. And so they left there and they asked me to come move out. So I moved to Georgia to help them, set up the business, set up all the POS systems, help them, stock and help them get all of the various licenses and stuff in order to get the business up and running. I also transferred to University of Georgia. And every weekend I would drive back to Augusta to help them with the business, take care of little things. And my dad is an honest, hardworking person, not a good business person. So the business ultimately failed and they closed up shop and they went back to Houston and left me there. So I was like, well, if I'm already here, why not?
So at the University of Georgia, you discovered the MIS program and that finally does feel like the right fit?
Ironically enough, it was the right fit. I mean, I love computer science. I love coding, but it was also the other aspect of me of I always felt like I want to do something related with business, just something, I don't know, something that's just itching me. So the MIS program was actually a perfect fit. So it was within the actual business school side of the fence. And it was the ability to kind of bridge the gap between business and technology. And I always felt that was kind of the one weird niche that I could fill. And it just clicked for me. So that was I finally found something that really clicked for me and I loved it. And I love the fact that you're thinking about systems, designs, you're thinking about how to run projects, how to actually execute on that. It's basically a program that's geared at a time really for creating the next generation of business analysts. That's the role that I ended up taking as my first job out of it.
But you also discover World of Warcraft, which leaves you quite tired on a few mornings.
Yes. And that's the funny thing. I'm a terrible student. So I spent pretty much most of my time in college playing World of Warcraft. So I remember very clearly I was raiding 25-man heroic raid, Lich King raid, all the way until 4 a.m. in the morning, and then attending my marketing class at 9 a.m. And I remember clearly that I was sleeping during the class. And I think the teacher actually called me out on it. So yeah. But ironically enough, I slept through most of my classes, but somehow these terms stuck to me. I remember marketing, they talk about thinking about the customer, the segmentation aspects of it. In finance, they talk about the rule of 72, the time value of money. All these weird things stuck to me. So I guess I learned in my sleep.
You took college subliminally.
You know what? Maybe there is something to be said about learning subconsciously,
You are listening to the Underserved Podcast. Underserved is produced by Maris Consulting Group, embracing the power of people in technology. For more information, visit mariscg.com. That's mariscg.com.
Now, you're doing some programming there. What language are you working in?
We were working on Java. I remember taking a Java class, and I learned a very, very important lesson during that Java class. It was finals. I was young and I was stupid. The problem was that after the finals, one of my friends came up to me like, "Hey, you already took the final test. Hey, can I take a look at it and, learn from you from that?" And I thought, whatever. I trust this guy. I gave him my code to take a look at it. Lo and behold, like a week later, I got called into the office with the professor with my friend next to me. And then it was like, apparently he actually not only used my code, he literally plugged in the USB drive with my code on the computer to open it up during the finals as he was writing it. So I learned a very important lesson. Be careful of who you trust. These things have major consequences. Every action has a consequence. So I ended up having to retake the whole Java class again. But luckily enough, the professor was incredibly sympathetic. I had no intention of this happening. I just wanted to help someone. And during my time in the University of Georgia, I was also tutoring folks. I actually spent more of my time helping other people learn than actually doing stuff in the class because it was just pretty easy for me, or it clicked very easily for me from that perspective. So I really wanted to help him. But then, the professor understood, and he was very, very kind to me. And he said, "We know you don't have to take this class. You could take it in your eyes closed." Like,
which you've done.
Actually, I didn't sleep during Java class. I actually spent time during Java class. Marketing and finance, I slept. But yeah, in Java, I remember, he was very kind to me. And he said, "You don't have to take it. Skip all the class. And then on the finals day, just come here and join." Actually, I think he actually just let me skip the finals because he already knew I got it. So
you'd already taken it. You'd already passed it. You were past the finish line, and then your buddy pulled you back.
He pulled me right back. But that's okay. Lesson learned.
So you end up graduating college. What's your first job out of college?
First job out of college. So my girlfriend at the time, actually, she graduated from a master's program about 6 months ahead of me, and she found a job in Chicago. So when I was looking for jobs in the last semester, I was looking for a consulting gig because I realized that you can be a consultant everywhere. So I ended up landing this job with Avanade, which is basically a sister company of Accenture that's really specialized in Microsoft products. And I remember very clearly that I thought, this was such a cool gig. I get to fly around everywhere. I get to be traveling from different places, kind of living this new life as a consultant. I thought oh, this is so cool. And then I found out that all my other friends got some consulting gigs too. They got the offers from Deloitte, some got them from Microsoft. And we also talked about what were their salaries and signing bonuses. And I remember very clearly that their offers were just so much better than mine. And I felt so disappointed because they were getting $20,000 more than I was getting paid for out of college. And I thought, am I not good enough? Did I not try hard enough? I remember clearly that I already accepted an offer to Avanade, and Microsoft came back to me for a next round interview to go on site. I was struggling with that because Avanade and Microsoft are so close. So if I take it, would I be doing something unethical?
If you take both jobs, you end up with neither.
Yeah, I get neither, right? So I ended up declining the Microsoft interview, and I felt bad about it. But I realized that was also another life lesson that I learned. You shouldn't be comparing yourself to other people, and it really doesn't matter where you start. What matters is how you finish.
No joy is going to come from constantly comparing yourself to others. How am I doing? Who's winning? Who's doing the best? And I think that social media is all about that. How's everyone doing? Oh, I'm not doing as well as that guy or that gal. And I just think it's unhealthy, but I'm some old guy telling you to get off my lawn.
No, I fully resonate with that. Right now in the tech community, there's an app out there called Blind, and you can actually see everyone's posting about their total comp. And it's a thing right there where you actually have to post about total comp or no one's going to reply to you. But when you see all these other people with total comp, it's just oh my God, you're just browsing on this. It's kind of like social media. You're seeing all these people doing fantastic lives, and you start comparing yourself and you just feel more down. It's one of the worst apps ever to use. It's good to have cost transparency, to know the actual salary transparency, but it's a whole nother thing to where people are using as bragging rights. And that's what ends up happening in these applications. So the best thing I ever did was deleting that.
And you're assuming that those folks are telling the truth and not blindly bragging, and inflating their salary by 40%.
I don't think they were lying. The data engineering compensations were kind of going through the roof in the past 2 years.
That much is true. What client are you working with when you're there?
Funny enough, when I was with Avanade, the first client I ever worked with was actually the client I ended up staying with through most of my actual career, like a whole decade, actually. PIMCO. In Avanade, what's really good about them is they set up this fantastic learning opportunity where they fly you out there for a whole month of training, intensive training to learn ins and outs of, like, for me, it was like specializing in Microsoft Dynamics CRM. And I remember they asked, like, who knew SQL? I was like, all right, I'll raise my hand. And they put me on the PIMCO project where I was supposed to be a data cleanup analyst. I did none of that. I did everything but that because I had really, really good mentorship from like Daniel Iman at the time. He was my manager he taught me a lot more in terms of like advanced SQL knowledge. He taught me how to like automate pipelines with like SSIS. And I eventually had other mentors like George Denayer from Accenture who taught me in terms of like data architecture, data warehousing, and how to do data integrations. And I was able to pick up every little bit. I had the time of my life. I was working 80 hours a week, because we had to do like data migrations on the weekend to do mock migrations to test it. We didn't want to have any sort of downtime to impact our user bases during the migration. And I remember working from Friday, 6 p.m. all the way nonstop until like Sunday, 8 a.m. in the morning.
Oof.
But it was the most fun I ever had. I loved it. I just absorbed everything, and I just loved the opportunity to rise to a new occasion.
You had made an interesting comment during the pre-call. You said when you leaned into data analytics, you didn't see rows and columns. You saw a story. What did you mean by that?
So I was doing a lot of data validation, just try to understand the data. And in order to do proper data validation, you should actually understand what is this data? Where's it coming from? What does it mean from a business context? So as I stared more and more at it, because I was just like analyzing and scanning through it, I no longer saw like just rows and columns. I saw a story. I saw like this individual, kind of like, you know how like when you watch those movies where you have those detectives with those photos on there with like the little red string making the connections. I saw that with data. It's like, there's a particular person here. There's an individual here. This is their story. These are all the events that led up to it. These are all the activities that we've actually spoken of. This is what they are in their journey as a company.
Now, you were living in Belize, then Houston, then Georgia, but now in Chicago, you must be seeing some snow, and there must be some scratching your head, and do I really want to keep doing this?
See, when I was in Georgia at the time and I visited Chicago, I was like, oh my God, this is a beautiful city. It's clean. It's sunny. It's not that hot. It's pretty cool during the summer. And the lake is beautiful. The architecture is gorgeous. It's all brand new. What they don't tell you is that that's a facade, because, you know, like Game of Thrones, they say winter is coming. That's Chicago. 6 months of like nonstop brutal winter where it's like, it's grimy, it's dark, it's gray. There's like tons of snow packed in. Your car is being like sloshed around with this like mixture of salt and dirt. And you really don't want to go out anywhere. And you're just like sitting hunkered down for like 6 months of winter. And even if you do go outside, it's usually below zero. So if it ever hits like freezing point, that's actually warm. It's like warm enough. And if it ever gets to like 30 degrees Fahrenheit, oh my God, you can just like go out with shorts. That's what you're more used to, accustomed in Chicago. And there was like one turning point for me. There's a guy, Robert, called me out from PIMCO. He was actually working with him at the time. And he asked, why don't you come out here for the headquarters? So I said, okay, I'll fly out. And I remember very clearly that weekend. That was supposed to be the Super Bowl weekend. The Patriots were playing. And usually every Super Bowl, I would like, order pizza, wings, like everyone does. But on that one day, on that 1 year, there was a blizzard. One of the biggest we've ever seen. Like overnight, dropped about like 3 or 4 feet of snow. Jeez. Everything was covered on the Sunday. Everything was covered with snow. And I saw it. I was like, oh my God, it's so gorgeous. But wait a minute, I'm supposed to be flying out tomorrow. So what happened was that the following morning, I shoveled the snow all around, and we were renting this house by this like corner lot. So not only do you have to shovel this one sidewalk, you have to shovel the other side of the sidewalk all the way to this like stairs leading up to the door, because if you don't do it, and the mailman, they trip as a result and, hurt themselves, they get sued. So we shoveled. So I literally, it felt like a World War I trench, you're shoveling this trench between like this 3-4 feet of snow. There's backbreaking labor. And I remember I was so tired that I actually like created a little chair based off of this trench. And I sat down and I took a photo of that. And then I think later that day, I shoveled the snow out of my car and then drove to the airport. I flew out, and it was a beautiful 7 degrees sunny weather in California. And Robert asked me, do you want to come out here? And I said, give me 2 weeks.
Just sell everything and move out west?
Sold everything. Didn't care about it. Get rid of everything. I drove my car from Chicago all the way down to California within 2 weeks. I was supposed to be a contractor, set up the whole S Corp, everything, the whole 9 yards, just to get out of Chicago. Anything to get out of that winter.
Well, that blizzard was powerful motivation. So what are you doing once you arrive at PIMCO in California?
I was super excited because I not only get to continue doing what I was doing at the time, which is really working on the data warehouse side of fence, acquiring more data, structuring it, enabling more and more BI reports. But also I got to learn from another mentor, Benjamin Chung at the time. And he was able to teach me the ins and outs of like how to kind of streamline the data warehouse ingestion processes, how to streamline the operations for offshore, how to like model the whole data modeling and why do we model data in such a way to optimize performance. And I was eventually able to take over the data warehouse team, and we were moving literally billions of records every single day. And there were huge projects that we ended up doing where we ended up processing, I recall, over the weekend, was like 3 billion records over a weekend while running a parallel night cycle because we were doing this massive migration effort to keep things moving on both fronts, whether it be the old system and the new system, to just make this work. In a span of 6 months, built out 1,000 data feeds to enable that project. In 6 months to instantiate this and to make it work and to coordinate all of the efforts and integration across teams. I learned a lot during that time. And that was like a huge opportunity for me to really step up. And it was really fun.
Syrinx has spent a lot of time and effort over the past 25 years building our reputation for quality and our brand. There was one big problem, though. No one could pronounce our name correctly.
Person on the street, brand testing, take one. Hi, can you pronounce the name of this company?
Syrinx?
That's a really good guess.
Really?
Now, how would you pronounce the name of this company?
Syrinx?
Not even close. Can you pronounce the name of this company?
Shrinks.
Luckily for us, Syrinx was acquired in 2022 by the DeWinter Group. We're rebranding Syrinx under DeWinter's highly regarded technology consulting arm, Maris Consulting Group. We bring Syrinx's deep technology delivery experience, and they bring broader delivery capabilities and a new identity as Maris.
Here's what you can count on from the unified Maris. We are now a nationwide powerhouse when it comes to technology consulting, from DevOps to developers to project managers to business systems.
So join me in welcoming our future as Maris. Hopefully people will have an easier time pronouncing this one.
How would you pronounce the name of this company?
Mariz.
How would you pronounce the name of this company?
Maurice?
Is that your uncle's name? Can you pronounce the name of this company?
Mars.
That's a planet.
Maybe not.
So contact Maris today and we'll help you get your project done on time and on budget. You can call us at 408-297-7500 or you can find us on the web at mariscg.com. That's mariscg.com. Let me ask you a high-level question for folks that don't know. What is PIMCO doing that they're coming up with these billions of records? Like, what's their line of business?
I think the best way to summarize it is that, number one, PIMCO is an asset management company, so they focus on investments, right? Where their real specialty is really on they specialize on the fixed income side of the fence. So these are bonds. The manager told me this once and it really stuck to me. And is in asset management, there's either two things. You either have more data than anyone else, or you're able to extract more value out of data than your competition. Because in the end, they're managing these portfolios and they want to be able to find the best strategies in order to achieve, alpha, right? To get better performance than the actual market. So that way customers want to buy our products.
And you had mentioned a neat phrase that stuck with me, that you helped them move faster from idea to insight. What did that mean?
I remember very clearly after the end of this one long, massive slog of I think it was almost like a 2-year project. And I remember clearly that I never want to do this again. So one thing about me is that if I don't want to do something, I will fume about it. And I remember fuming about it, and it was raining in California, which is very, very weird. And I remember staring outside this window and I was thinking to myself, I never want to do this again. So I thought to myself, okay, we're going to be moving to the cloud. How can I use this opportunity to make a huge impact and a change? So we ended up embarking on this journey of moving to cloud. And I was leading a lot of the efforts in terms of building out this new analytics data platform. The idea I had in the past was I've seen what it takes in order to go from idea. So if you have an idea of I want to be able to run an analysis of a customer using a social media data set, to acquire a new vendor feed, to be able to integrate it, to be able to store it, to process it, to create the dashboard, to run a model and to analyze and to provide an insight to whether it be a portfolio manager or an account manager. That normally takes at minimum 6 months, maybe 3 months at most. The thought process behind this is the hypothesis is that if we can leverage this modern analytics data platform, how could we take an idea from insight, not from 3 months? What about just a couple of weeks or even a few weeks? That is huge because when it comes to like on the investment side, there's a huge push of it, but it's not as fast. When you're working with a lot of marketing teams, time is of the essence. So the more delay you have to be able to produce an insight to action on it, the less likely your customer will be able to convert. And so the whole idea of creating this analytics platform is we were ended up able to take an idea to insight from 3 months down to like 2 weeks. Fundamentally transform the overall iteration cycle, and it fundamentally transform how people can leverage the analytics, because if you have an idea, you can prototype and then just go through all the iterations to really refine down that outcome to really enable your business. And that was what we were able to build. We were able to build a platform that enabled that at PIMCO.
There, you're part of a giant machine, it sounds like, but you had an itch to build something from scratch. Is that what leads you to Group 1001?
Yeah, that experience at PIMCO really kind of honed in and made me really reflect on what I value and what I wanted. And I realized that I just like building things. That's what really excites me. And I was very, very fortunate to be in an industry where I had the opportunities and the knowledge and experience that I had, where I ended up leaving PIMCO to go to Group 1001, where I wanted to start a new chapter. And what they really had struggled with was really, I would say they had an overall like lack of data maturity curve, but that was the opportunity that I saw. And my hypothesis is I spent like 3 years building that at PIMCO. What if I could do this in 6 months? If I had all the different pieces together, I already had all my learnings. I already had all my experience there. Management is incredibly supportive. How can I take an organization that is used to getting CSV extracts from reports and then transform them to be a data-centric organization? That's what led me to leaving, because I wanted to build something again. In about the first month and a half, I was more like firefighting because everything was broken, of course. But after we fought all the fires within the first month and a half, I remember like we spent time to figure out the platform, the architecture, figuring out how we want to piece it together, building the team, hiring a brand new data engineering organization team out there. I had to taught myself everything from scratch because I was more hands-off at PIMCO, but here I'm more hands-on. I had to like learn how to do everything from scratch, from automating the whole CI/CD pipeline of instantiating Snowflake instances, learning Airflow end-to-end to handle all of our existing pipelines, to just building detailed processes in Python and transforming them over. And I remember very clearly 6 months after landing here, we were able to successfully migrate all of the Power BI reports on the previous Postgres platform onto Snowflake. That means setting up the Snowflake infrastructure. That means setting up the roles and permissioning. That means setting up all of the security components in networking. That means migrating all of the ETL processes from Airflow. That means migrating every single dashboard and validating and regression testing all of that, automating all of the validation processes to roll it out in such a manner that no one actually knew it. Like it just happened so seamlessly that it just going to flip a switch overnight, right before Christmas.
What was the reaction?
The reaction from our management side, number one, they were surprised at how it happened so quickly. But at the same time, there wasn't a humongous shift. I didn't achieve the goal I wanted, which is to transform the organization to be data-centric. But from a technical goal perspective, it was amazing. It was very well received from that regard. But then came New Year, and I wanted to do even more. And that's when we really kind of kicked it off in high gear. Now that we had the foundational components in place, we migrated Airflow to Dagster because I kid you not, there's just so many challenges with Airflow. I remember clearly right on January 3rd, we kicked off the POC. A week later, we set up the infrastructure and the networking, all this stuff right there. 3 days later after that, we migrated all 76 DAGs that were running all of our cycles over to Dagster. And that's the level of developer velocity that I absolutely adore. And that's what I really wanted, is that if you can actually do things faster, to have a shorter iteration cycle, then the productivity gains on this is incredible. You do not need a massive data engineering team. And I remember at my prior gig, I was managing about like 40 different peoples at one point, 40-man team, distributed across multiple different time zones, New York, Austin, LA, China, India. And I was working around the clock just to keep the system alive. And I remember like, there must be a better way of doing this because we're just scaling with people, not code. But here, with what we were able to build, I can see that a single data engineer can actually be as productive as 10, if not 20, because of this new platform that we built out. And a few weeks ago, it just like ultimately clicked after we celebrated all of this as a result. For management, it came down whereby we really have to optimize the productivity of our team. And so it was like, how do we optimize productivity? Like it became a mandate, like we have to optimize productivity. So we sat down and talked with the business counterparts and really narrowed down on how we can actually enable that productivity. After about 1.5 days of meeting, I guess 4 hours later, we were able to produce a dashboard and roll it out to production that provide a level of visibility that simply wasn't there before. In 2 days, we were able to go from an idea, an immediate high priority ask, to delivering a dashboard. I've never seen that before. And that's when it fully clicked that, wow, thinking back, it was probably like 9 months in, I finally kind of got that goal, like idea to insight, months to days now, getting that developer velocity, getting that iteration cycle. My vision is like, we should be able to sit down with the business folks, really dive into their business problems and build that iteration and get it in their hands in a couple of days. So that way we can then go to the next round and next round and next round. And that is like transformational. And that actually gets them to be a lot more data centric, to really drive that conversation to be based off of data and the results that you get from the insights instead of just hypothetical theory and experience.
Yeah, it sounds like you were kind of laying the groundwork there for a long time, getting the tools, the systems, building this valuable infrastructure, but you didn't have a showpiece to really like let everyone see like, hey, this is how valuable it is. And then when you do something that used to take you 6 months in 2 days, then the light bulbs go off. This is something great.
Exactly. This is something great. And then to see the eyes of the users, where they just like, when you show them it, and then their just eyes just light up. And that's the beauty of like visualizations and data analytics, is that you can actually see it right there. It's visual and it's also kinetic. You can drill into it. You can filter on it. You can use it to deep dive and ask a question and answer it with data and dive in more and more until you get the answer. And that's the beauty of this. But to see it happening in 2 days, what I'm used to, like, 3 to 6 months, it was great.
Now, I think the trade-off from before, where you would manage teams and things would take a long time, to having that mythical 10x or 20x engineer that can do all this stuff at his own desk by him or herself, is that you kind of move from having to manage a ton of people and resources to having this cognitive load of, all right, I need to know how this whole matrix fits together and works together in order to get it to function. Do you see that as a challenge?
It is a challenge. I'm going to be honest with you. If I had not had the experience I had in the past, I can't imagine other organizations would be able to do this. It's actually a big problem today because I come from a background where we used Informatica and Oracle Exadata. And that was kind of like the stack, right? You either have Teradata and Informatica, or you had like Oracle and Informatica, or SQL Server and I guess maybe SSIS. But you were used to that kind of stack. But now there's this whole concept of like this modern data stack, which is a more modular, best of breed solution where, you have the core data warehouse being Snowflake, and instead of having Informatica, now you have all these n number of services, whether it be Fivetran for replication, DBT or Coalesce for data transformation, Atlan for your end-to-end lineage visibility, Soda or Great Expectations for your data validation. If you have no framework in your head to understand what cog in the wheel this is functioning, how do you build that? I don't know if you've ever seen this diagram. They always show like this data analytics like tool diagram, the ecosystem. It's like 2,000 products nowadays. How do you look into that? And I think that's the problem in the industry today, is that now we went down this modern data stack. Everything is decomposed. Everything is compartmentalized and it's modular. You can integrate it very easily, but you need to know what it does. Where does it fit? And that's something that mental strain, beyond just like even learning the business process, I'm just talking pure architecture and integration. That is an incredible amount of tools to sift through. And I think that's what we need more in this industry, is really to prescribe, this is this reference architecture design that will show you how to build this. And here's maybe some boilerplate code, and boom, you have an operational end-to-end best of breed data analytics solution that could scale for gigabytes to petabytes of data easily and very cost optimized, where your engineers can now focus on delivering business value than figuring out and researching and integrating and doing all of the different things you have to do to build this stack. So I was extremely fortunate to have that experience. And I want to find an avenue where I can hopefully share that, so that way other people don't have to go redo all this learning, because like, honestly, like it's like 3+ years of learning. How can we condense that in something that everyone out there can do? And if everyone out there can do it, then we can transform a lot more organizations to to move off of legacy systems into these modern data stacks. The thing that I always tell people is the reason why you migrate to cloud is not necessarily for the cost perspective. The real advantage is the innovations. And when I say about innovations, I mean all of these ecosystem partners that are building and focusing on that one problem, that one product problem that they're solving for the customer, and really building something that no one has solved very fully, but they will solve it to the teeth because that's what they were focusing on, to get that product market fit for that one problem. But that means there are going to be solutions out there that are just really innovative, but they're not going to be integrating with these legacy solutions. They're not going to be building on like the Oracle or the Teradata. They're going to be building on Snowflake or Databricks on these modern platforms because they recognize there's a huge community of players in this space. And there's a lot of great integrations and ecosystems and partnerships that are really fostering this innovation. And that's the reason why I tell folks that why you should migrate to cloud is to tap into that innovation. So that way you as a small organization, even if you're a small insurance company, to have data analytics capabilities of a big tech company. And maybe even better than a big tech company because they are actually on what I consider the new legacies.
Earlier this season, fellow guest Rob Moore talked about tech decisions and wanting to just reduce the number of decisions you have to make in order to have an architecture. He gave the example of like Vue.js is, a lot more well-formed than React, where you can make 1,000 decisions. And I think if you're saying there's 2,000 different tools and someone sits down with a blank sheet of paper, which ones am I going to use? I think the only way you can reduce those decisions is with a working proof of concept, working code, showing all the pieces working together, doing something useful. And then people could say, oh, okay, I'll take that rubber stamp now and use it on my problem.
Exactly. And the beauty is now you have a framework. The hardest part is getting that mental model. To have a mental model, I have to think about this in this decomposed manner. So that way I know that, okay, if I want to extend this platform to incorporate machine learning or data science capabilities to do predictions and decision-making, leveraging a lot of these machine learning capabilities, well, I just need to find a tool that does that, but it integrates to this stack. And that's it. And that's actually what I did when I was attending Data Council last month. I met up with like this one company called Savvy AI, and it was beautiful. They were able to really hone into the problem of how do I build a product so a data organization don't have to hire like a team of data scientists and a team of ML engineers in order to productionize this workload. How do I build a tool that actually just do this whole thing end to end, very simple, very UI centric, but kind of really dumb down this, but give the flexibility so that way a business user can actually use it to build their own prediction algorithm. And that's what you can tap into now once you have this. And that's the beauty of leveraging Snowflake. That's the beauty of leveraging and building on top of this platform there.
And when you're away from keyboard and not actually, making things 10 or 100 times better, what are you doing for fun?
I'll be honest, I actually just, most of the time I stay on the keyboard. What I used to do for fun is I used to play a lot of video games. But nowadays, I don't have much time to play a lot of video games. I do a lot of research because I love the space. I love like diving in and understanding new tools, understanding where they fit, seeing the innovation in this space, reaching out to different startups and different founders to really understand the problem that they're solving, how they're solving it. What are some of that I can provide as avenues to help drive and foster that innovation? And I love that. So to be honest, not much out away from keyboard. Most of my time is just spending time with family and then, just relaxing.
So everyone talks about these days the democratization of data, but you said you prefer to think about the democratizing the 10x engineer. What did you mean by that?
What I meant by that is, after actually spending a lot of time building out the platform and the developer toolings, I realized that in the data industry, everyone's focused, like you said, that democratization of data. And I say, no, data is always there. You're always going to have tons of data. It's like, whether you like it, it will be democratized. There's no way you could hold it. It's a treasure trove. It's value for an organization. But how do you extract the more value out of it? And I think that's where, after building out the actual data platform, a couple of times already, I realized that if you build it right, you can make a single engineer or a single data analyst 10, 20x more productive. To have the development velocity where you can iterate in minutes, if not seconds, is tremendous. But the key thing is with a platform is you have to build it in such a way where it provides the guardrails so that you can't make a lot of mistakes. And you have all these processes in place that are well-defined. So there's a certain pattern that you have to develop such that you can achieve velocity while also having safety in knowing that the code that you're building, the models that you're building, everything you're doing is well-tested, well-formed. So I love this whole capability nowadays with the product platforms of leveraging CI/CD, leveraging a lot of the automation to enable this. And I've seen it myself, like you can actually be 10, 20x productive as you build this. And I think that's the thing that people need to move away from, is moving away from the thought process of democratizing data to democratizing the 10x engineer, because as we're already seeing in the current landscape with all the layoffs and everything, and with a lot of companies being cash strapped, and with the very, the downturn in the economic environment, we need to focus on unlocking the potential of our existing resources rather than hiring more resources. Why don't we make them more productive? Why do we delight their experiences? How can we make them not just do their day-to-day jobs, but to do it in such a way that they're excited about it. They want to innovate. They want to do more. They want to be creative. That's what I want to see.
Are there any other themes you've kind of noticed across your career?
Coming where I'm from, this kid from Belize, to be somehow working here in US in one of the hottest industries out there in data analytics, to have that opportunity and to be in this space for over 10 years. And what I've seen is that there's always this constant evolution. There's always constant, I think there's like 3 different cycles of data analytics that we went through now. And we're on the third one, which is I consider more like this cloud, data warehouse, modern data stack kind of iteration, this next cycle. So it's like 3 lifetimes of data I've seen. The only thing I could probably say, the only overall theme is that change will always occur. Change is a constant. You can't fight change. What you can do as an engineer, as an analyst, as an individual, is that you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You have to embrace the change. Use the opportunities that are available when change occurs. And I see that a lot in terms of like what's happening in the generative AI space, where everyone's scared for good reason, but I don't think they should be. Rather than being scared and trying to resist change, embrace it, drive the direction of the change, make it such that you're pulling the bull by the horns and driving it. Be part of the conversation to help make it become something good, something that's useful for society. So that's all I could say. Like that's the only theme. Change is constant. Embrace it.
Gu, thank you so much for joining us today on Underserved and sharing your experiences with our listeners.
Thanks so much, Andrew. It's been a real pleasure. I love getting the chance to actually have an avenue to share my experiences, my journey, and hopefully someone will be able to use this as a way of inspiring them on their journey.
Absolutely. And we'll talk to everyone soon on the next episode of Underserved.
Thank you for listening to the Underserved Podcast. For more information on the topics discussed and for show notes, visit the show website, underserved.fm. And please be sure to rate, like, and subscribe to Underserved on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.